I thought, oh, okay, being an architect, and that I will have more impact because I'm actually affecting where people are living, which will affect their health, their well-being, their psychology, everything, because we are surrounded by these buildings. We live, well, these days as a modern humans, we live 90% of our time in these buildings. So it's affecting us from when we are born till when we are passing away, and no medication would allow us to help all the way through. So this is a lot more impactful way of being useful to humankind, being useful to our health and well-being.
LED lighting, and the fact that actually LED lighting in buildings is often suboptimal to the point where it might be causing damage to us. And, I think one of the findings was incandescent light. The old light bulbs were actually better in terms of the light that they were giving off. And suddenly I'm like, well, in the race to kind of make us all much more energy efficient, did anyone think about the law of unforeseen consequences in terms of what this might be doing to our health?
Welcome to Sunlight Matters, the podcast that reconnects us with the sun. Join us as we explore the power and influence of our star, the force at the heart of everything. Each episode, we speak with leading experts to uncover the ways sunlight shapes our world.
By the way, I love the painting behind you, the picture behind you. The moon in Louisiana, that is just stunning.
Yeah, I really love this one. I wish I had the actual painting. This is just a poster that I got from Louisiana Museum. Just couldn't help myself.
Wow.
It's just
Quantilism, is it? So it's just beautiful. So anyway, let's get started. Welcome to today's show, and I am delighted to welcome Dr. Mandana Khanie, I hope I pronounced that right, from UCL, and you're a lecturer in Health and Wellbeing in Sustainable Buildings, and also Deputy Director of Light and Light Programme. So would you like to just give us a bit of an introduction to yourself and tell us a bit about the roles that you play?
Yeah, thank you, Dave, for that introduction. Yes, I go by Mandana Khanie, but my full family name is Khanie. So yeah, you have all the right to confuse that a bit. Somehow, since I moved to UCL, I have turned into just the Khanie part.
Okay.
But that's how it is. Yeah, as you mentioned, I'm a lecturer at the moment in health and well-being and sustainable buildings at UCL. My background is architectural engineering, and I've also studied design for sustainable development. So basically some of the things that I have been really passionate about. So I have in general followed my passion all the way through in terms of the topics that I've studied and continue to sort of follow up in terms of research and education. And yeah, as you mentioned, I'm at the moment Deputy Director of Light and Lighting Program. It's a Master of Science program at Bartlett in Built Environment and Faculty of Built Environment. From next year, I will be the director of this program, hoping to continue what is bringing in terms of creativity and technology in light and lighting, but at the same time hoping to meet the next generation's needs in terms of what we actually need in education related to this topic. Of course, we always have to make things better, and the hope is to have enough momentum to create this next generation platform.
Fantastic. Well, I'm immediately struck by the fact that in terms of what you're lecturing on, it talks about well-being in buildings. And I'm kind of fascinated, like as an architect, how you kind of then moved into thinking about, I guess, the more psychological aspects of people in buildings. Where did you kind of sort of start from in that journey?
Yeah, that's a really good question. It could go back really long time, actually. I see that myself, that you're bringing back everything to when I started actually my journey, because initially I wanted to be a medical doctor. My mom is a medical doctor, and I was really interested to follow up that trajectory of field, and was fascinated by biology, by physiology of human being, by psychology. And not just human, just nature in general. My dad is also is a professor in natural resources, and was always fascinated by how we are living in, how our habitat is affected by us, how it's affecting us. But then I was encouraged by actually a sentence my mom told me to go to architecture rather than going to medication. And you know what that is? I guess it's kind of famous. I don't know who has said this, but it's like, if you're a medical doctor, if you're a doctor, if something goes wrong, if you do something wrong, it goes under the ground, so it's kind of gets forgotten somehow. But if you're an architect, it's or a building or building your environment, this is staying underground, so it's much more impactful. It will affect us for years and years or hundreds of years. I thought, oh, okay, being an architect and a building, being in the building, that I will have more impact because I'm actually affecting where people are living, which will affect their health, their well-being, their psychology, everything, because we are surrounded by these buildings. We live, well, these days as a modern humans, we live 90% of our time in these buildings. So it's affecting us from when we are born till when we are passing away. And no medication would allow us to help all the way through. So this is a lot more impactful way of being useful to humankind, being useful to our health and well-being.
I mean, it's fascinating that, because I think I haven't really sort of sat down and thought about that. But what you're saying is so true, and it's the places we live and the places we work and whatever we do, it's sort of, they tend to be inside, don't they? Particularly, in the northern hemispheres, we are, and I think you said 90% of our time is indoors. And I'm kind of interested because I get this feeling that architecture, and when people are thinking about buildings, they kind of will design the building and they'll talk about things like sunlight and daylight, but it will almost be an afterthought to the actual way that the building will look and work, rather than something which should be almost the top priority. So, is that kind of a fair assessment? Or
yeah, definitely. I mean, that's basically the whole point of how sort of make the best out of this built environment that we have. We need this condition. We have to, I mean, we have strived for millions of years to be able to create environment that is safe and allows us to sort of thrive. And we have to still continue, again, through research and education, to make it better and better for us. And we know that, okay, this area that we've created, these type of buildings, of course, they are safe for many reasons, they're structurally sound and so on and so forth. But we have to also be aware and conscious of the fact that all those millions of years, we didn't evolve in these conditions. We were more outside, getting a lot of sunlight, we were getting a lot of daylight. Our body is evolved basically as people under the sun rather than people in 90% indoors. And we need to understand how this transition, which has happened really recent, is affecting us. And we still don't know a lot of actually. It is only perhaps 30-40 years we started knowing about the circadian rhythm and how the light is affecting that, and through our ganglion cells a lot more we still haven't even discovered. So that's kind of by itself quite scary, that we are in this condition that we don't know much about how it's affecting us.
look, I mean, it's really like, the more I ponder that, the more I'm like, God almighty, we have maybe walked ourselves into situations where, we might actually be damaging our health by the way we live. There's a piece of research which I think has just been published by a colleague of yours at UCL, which is talking about LED lighting and the fact that actually LED lighting in buildings is often suboptimal to the point where it might be causing damage to us. And I think one of the findings was incandescent light. The old light bulbs were actually better in terms of the light that they were giving off. And suddenly I'm like, well, in the race to kind of make us all much more energy efficient, did anyone think about the law of unforeseen consequences in terms of what this might be doing to our health? So to me, it was a great example where people haven't done this for the wrong reasons, but the net result may be actually terrible for us as humans.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we are making decisions as we know more, but of course, at the same time, we are creating situations for ourselves that probably are still unknown. And yeah, this is also my whole point of emphasizing on research and education and how important they are, even though I think sometimes in a lot of contexts, their importance are being neglected or not as clear for a lot of people. Research is a waste of time, it's a luxury, or education, you don't need education, you can just better be off, like, you know, these kind of things you hear a lot from many already, because yeah, you can get rich by not educating yourself. These you know, that kind of, and just exactly what you're saying about this example that you mentioned shows like how important is to continue having new insights, continue challenging what we know and changing the paradigms through research, and how important it is to continue educating people so have the right capacity to bring those actually back to the society. Otherwise, we will end up in these loops. Definitely, the energy saving was an important part. It was a lot research, but yeah, of course, it's not enough. That's why we need to continue. That's why research, these new insight, constantly changing what we know is very important. And that's, for me, that's the only way, or these two trajectories are the only way that we can shape our future. And otherwise, we will be stuck in a situation that we might end up not getting enough of the right light in the right time, like if we want to talk about just the light, and already that would create in future later on conditions for us that are will require medication, etc. So it's really like, why
It's
don't we prevent it before it gets to becoming a source of a problem of obesity or cancer or whatever, all these issues that we know are from lack of proper access to daylight, and it's proven that there are really high correlations with from breast cancer to obesity to all sorts of disease, diabetes, to how the exposure to light or the history of exposure to light of those type of patients have been. So yeah, I mean, research and
and
education.
it's kind of, if you follow the trajectory of many of these diseases, they kind of correspond in many ways to some of the changes in our behavior. So, you know, we are spending more and more time inside. Like, I read some pretty frightening research which says that since COVID, the average American and Brit, I think, is spending 2 hours less outside than before. Now, for many of us, we won't even think about the consequences of that. But, you know, as you say, like, we need education. So we need, you know, and I guess a question for you is, if I was to be doing an undergraduate course in architecture and building design, how much of it is about like health and wellness in terms of the people who are going to inhabit the buildings you're in? I don't know what the answer to that is, but I'm presuming it's not a huge amount.
Yeah, you're totally right. It's not actually a huge amount that we have. I mean, these things also have been introduced in recent years. For example, at UCL, we have a program in health and well-being, which is a result of same people thinking the same issues, and of course that understanding is there, which comes through the research. We have these insights. We are challenging these existing paradigms. So we are creating basis for educating people more and more towards this, and creating the capacity that is required to basically roll the wheel towards the right direction, and hoping it will go to, well, I'm confident that it does. Like, when we started talking about sustainability, I was a student then, and this was introduced immediately at Chalmers in all the modules, for example, in all the educational, no matter what kind of discipline, what kind of program, that there had to be one in all the program, there had to be one module about sustainability within that field. And I think that already create a huge impact for our generation to focus and really put aside a big part of what our thinking, our projects on this topic, and it started rolling. So it's really important to have that. But as you said, I mean, it still is limited. It's not that we talk about it in every other program or every other module. How does this kind of decision affect our health? And I think that should be there. How does this decision, how you're making this LED, how does it going to affect people's health? How does it affect energy? How does it affect? So all of them have to be considered instead of just one dimensional. And this multi-dimensional thinking about the topics, I think, is something that I'm also supporting a lot within, for example, our own field, my field, which is the built environment. There are a lot of new approaches. Again, this is sort of what we have started moving towards, understanding the multidimensional aspects of built environment on us. So we know, okay, how the thermal conditions are affecting us. We know how the air quality is affecting us. We know how the light is affecting us somewhat. But how all of them together are affecting us, what are the interaction between these stimuli, and how do we have to adjust between them to create the right environment. And this multisensory or multidimensional thinking is something, again, that we are trying to bring into our teaching, our education, and also our research to understand the humans better within this built environment. So basically, constantly going towards introducing topics that helps. But again, you're right. I don't know. The question that you pose, like, okay, how much do we teach our students, and how much do we do a focused research on this topic? Still minimal. We tend to probably pay and spend a lot more of the research money into creating medication that would later on help us with the consequences rather than preventing to get to those consequences.
I guess that's the way the world works, is there's not a lot of money to be had in prevention, is there, frankly?
Yeah.
So, but, without going down that particular rabbit hole, I was really interested because I spoke to Nico Gentili from Lund University, who I know you know, and he talked about the balance between environment, financial and social, as kind of, when you think about buildings, you've got those three bodies, and the social aspect is not being really kind of dealt with. So environmental, you talk about sustainability, and rightly we're all going down a route of trying to be more sustainable, but nobody's really thought about some of the social impacts of that. And obviously financial is kind of tends to be the one that in terms of building design or whatever, tends to be the thing which kind of leads thing, which I thought it was just a really nice kind of way of looking at the problem. Because I think, as you say, we haven't really, from what I can see and from what I'm hearing from you, we haven't really thought about, like, people in build, and just all of these impacts. And it's fascinating because it seems that UCL is really kind of trying to lean into this topic and kind of cover it off. And I guess you've got everyone from sort of physiologists through to architects who, I don't know if you all work together, but there seems to be a very common thread. So, and I guess the output of that could then bleed out more into the mainstream, couldn't it? So sorry, there was a bunch of things I've said in there. And just pick anything, throw it all up in the air and see what you can pick
out of it. The environmental and financial aspects of things is really like driving a lot of the pathways that we build, of course. So what we try to always say is, like, make sure that the human is in center. So we are thinking about the human needs. We are thinking, so all these financial decisions that we are making, is it going to be good for us or not? Because that would be a drawback if it's not, because then you will basically lose that money. That's the simple way of communicate with the finance, so you don't want to lose that money. We did a really interesting exercise in one of the healthy building conferences it was in Aachen, and it was held by, actually I forgot the name, but it was also the UCL was involved in creating this workshop, and it was creating a setup that we were all had a role. It was like a role play sort of game, that, okay, you're an investor, you're a building user, and you're the researcher, and the other one is the contractor, and there was this building to be built, and we need to convince each other, like, what is the most important thing. in building this building. So of course the investor wanted to just get his money back. So if he's investing this much, so that's all he cared about. And we really got into those kind of roles. I was actually playing the investor role, and I was like, anything the others once said, I was like, no, I don't think that's true. And when it becomes money, then it's like, okay, I want my money back. I don't care. So it's really interesting. It was really interesting game that we played, and very eye-opening in a sense that, of course, as a researcher or an educator, you want the best for, not that we all want the best for everything, but that's the main drive as being a researcher educator. You want to create the best conditions forward. But then you have to be able to communicate that. So the communication is how much health or performance of a human would be, how much money it will bring us. So I guess that's one thing in that kind of context to be able to talk about and to communicate. So can we put a price on it? And that's really, really difficult. And that's, I guess, one of the reasons probably we don't pay as much attention to it, because it's difficult to put a price on it. It's priceless. But if we were able to say, okay, this many, it would have been really
100%. I mean, building a
Yeah.
business case around this is essential, isn't it?
Yeah, but it is, but it has been very difficult to do so, because there's so many parameters involved that you cannot say, okay, I guarantee you that if you do this, you will get this 100%. We cannot do that, and that's the reason we cannot really sell this in the same way. Even though we know that, okay, if people are healthy, this will be beneficial to that building, to the owner of the building, to the employer that is gonna basically rent that building. So it will all at the end be beneficial to the investor, but we cannot say 100% you will. With the energy we can. So you say, okay, if you install this, you will save this much energy, then this will be the amount that you will be gaining out of this. But this is difficult with the health. So yeah, that dilemma is always there, and it's kind of an interesting challenge. And the only thing we can say is that this is important. We cannot put money number on it, and it would be really nice to be able to at least have some estimation. And of course there are research on that as well, but it's a really interest for myself, and I hope I could do some research related to that. And I have that always in mind, because it's good to have that business mind and be able to understand how to actually make this work. That's the point, because if the bottleneck is that financially we cannot put a number on it, then we need to also address that and see, okay, we have changed the paradigm. We know that this is good for people. We are educating people to create that capacity. We are even creating the policies. But as long as there is no money involved, or nobody wants to still invest on it, then I guess we are not getting anywhere. So it's one part of the whole thing.
I mean, it's interesting, because I think the problem with it is the return on investment is probably multi-generational, rather than, one where you can it's not something you could put on the stock exchange, basically. Like, I've been doing quite a bit of reading around the subject of ADHD. Now, ADHD, 25% of the prison population in the UK has ADHD. And, I read this fascinating research, which was, you can predict to 96%, and this is really fresh research from Japan, 96% accuracy whether someone's got ADHD by taking a picture of their retina. And, I think pictures of eyes tend to be good markers for certain neurological conditions. And it happens to be that one of them is ADHD. Now, then, that took me down a little path, which was, well, is there a corresponding, if it's the eye, is there a correspondence between ADHD and light? Turns out that people with ADHD, they tend to suffer from SAD more than just the general population. So you can see that there's a connection between circadian rhythms, light, and ADHD. So going to your question of the business case, you could say, well, actually, a prisoner costs us X amount of pounds or euros or whatever it is. And actually, if we could provide sort of we know light impacts people, like in education. If we could stabilize some of these ADHD people by having lighter classrooms or whatever it is, and I'm just being so high level and, ridiculously simple, I'm afraid, around this. But you could then say, well, actually, there is a business case, which is, we need better classrooms with more light access because we know that that will reduce the prison population. But the problem with that is you're then talking about a sort of 10, 20-year horizon, and nobody's kind of interested in that sort of thing, are they? Unfortunately, because that is the, I guess, the reality, isn't it? That
Yeah.
light has this whole new, well, emerging topic. You can see the relationship between us and light is such a kind of crucial one to our health and wellness, but the problems don't show up for years, do they?
Yeah, that's exactly what you're saying. I think using the word multi-generational is perfect for this. That's the fact. And that's why it's going slowly through gradual research that we are doing. I mean, research and education, it's not fast. We need time for that. It takes
Yeah, of
time.
course.
And I'm not, I mean, I think we are on the right track. We are doing the right things. It just takes time. Of course, we cannot say tomorrow if there's going to be a building here, we cannot convince the person about all of these facts. But now I think there is more, everybody's a little bit more conscious about the effects of built environment because of the voices that we create through education, because of the research that we are doing. So even though we don't know enough, even though you hear like bits and parts from different research groups, but we are all, working on the right track in terms of thinking about global health, in terms of thinking about the effects of built environment. So there are some positive things there. There are some, I see the light at the end of the tunnel that
No,
this is going
I mean,
to, and hopefully, I mean, the hope is that we are building better and better buildings, even though currently maybe that's not the case, and this takes generations to be going towards what is more sustainable and healthier for us as humans, and creating it. And it's not just creating the buildings, it's also like creating the behaviors around the buildings that are required, like how much should we be inside, how much should we be outside, do we create enough spaces that allow us to go outside or not, like how can we incorporate that in the architecture. So that should become like sort of a physical program of the building that has to accommodate for that, even though maybe it's not necessarily cost efficient now for the building investor, but it is through what we are saying and through this disseminating, incepting into the newer generations or next generations, I think it will become true at some point that we are creating better and better building. The fact that you and I are sitting here and creating this podcast is also towards that, and I truly believe in this type of trying to be heard and trying to promote these for a larger number of people.
Well, look, I think I am really encouraged, actually. And I think the fact that UCL, which is, one of the top universities globally, is on this kind of gives me great encouragement. Because I guess as I've been looking through and doing my background research, there are a lot of people out there who've decided that this is a great topic for clicks, and, there's quite a voice on social media around all of this. And actually, if you go back to the sources of what they're saying, it's often a bit flaky, to be honest with you. But actually being able to reference proper research, which is peer-reviewed, published, through places like UCL and the East Anglian University and all. I'm really proud, actually, that the Brits seem to be kind of on this. And, it's really, really heartening. And as you say, I think then being able to kind of bleed that into the educational establishment and creating courses around this, or making sure it's of what is part of the narrative, I think is absolutely brilliant. But it also feels like we're really at the start of this journey. Like, as you said, I think sustainability was one aspect. But if you think about sustainability and the way it's described as ESG or whatever, in the social aspect has just not been thought about. And I think or if it's been thought about, it's not been thought about in relationship between people and light effectively. So I think that's brilliant that this sort of movement sort of happening.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, yeah, going back to what you say about UCL and Bartlett as well. I mean, Bartlett is, I think, ranked as the first, has a first rank, or ranked as, what do you call it?
Number one position.
Yes, number one position in architecture and built environment in terms of education. And you can see, like, I mean, for me, I'm still discovering like many labs and researchers that are focusing on so many aspects of it. They're like, oh, I was thinking about that. It's really amazing that these guys are already putting it so much forward. So it's like really forward thinking. Many groups like looking at various aspects of how the environments are affecting us, both indoors and outdoors. Like, how do we move in the urban area? What are the effects of urban area? And really implementing high-tech sensors around just to make this understanding and how the effect of the built environment in terms of pollution, in terms of heat, etc., is on people's well-being and behavior. So we are really monitoring this since long, and talking to each other with nature, discussions about biodiversity, nature and people, what kind of vegetation should we have around the city, of how it is evolving. I don't know, so many topics that, you know, that you just feel really great just to be part of this and feel that, yeah, we are on top of researchers are really at UCL trying hard, and I'm fascinated. I mean, I've also joined in 2 years, so I'm really fascinated by the amount of enthusiasm, ambitions, and work that is being done on this topic. So that's why normally I'm not so pessimistic person, but I've just started to being like, oh, okay, we are actually making impact, and looking, you know, feeling really optimistic that this is going the right direction, and we are really trying hard, doing very sophisticated research in terms of understanding how to create these environments that will allow us to thrive better, prevent many of those situations and consequences that we are facing at the moment, etc. Yeah, so about UCL, I think that network is really working well from what I'm seeing, and I'm really happy to be part of that. And as you said, we are still at the beginning of this. The topic of sunlight, daylight, exposure to it, we have, for various reasons, energy driven, mainly try to avoid it as much as possible. And of course, this has shown that is not optimal either. We have seen the consequences, and now we are trying to understand those consequences better. Niche research, as you mentioned, from the effects of LEDs to interactions of different exposures to characterizing the response to different exposures that we have. These are, at least this is something that I'm focusing on. It seems really small and very niche to just characterizing the response to the exposure that we have, but I believe that, you know, this little equation could solve a lot of the problems that we have, like how we control the building systems around us to better accommodate for our more natural responses to the environment. So from that point of view, to how we move in this indoors, or how we move outside, and which paths are we going. I have a student who's also working on healthier paths through the city, like how can we map the healthy pathways. Health and safety, of course, you want to be safe as well. That's one part of it. You don't want to go outside on your bike and bam. So there are certain routes, of course, that are safer, that people actually feel safer in those because of the traffic, because of how they are lit. So how do we kind of promote those? How can we rebuild them? What kind of architectural elements are there that make people feel safer there, and are they healthy or not? So what kind of exposure do you get? Maybe it's a really nice path, but it's in the most polluted area of the city. Is that healthy enough to bike or run in that pathway? So it's both indoor and outdoor. I mean, outdoor, if it's a densified city just like London, as it's as this mega city that we have, so we have that kind of issues. Just being outdoor doesn't necessarily mean that you're healthy, so you have to pick your spot. So we need to kind of identify those and understand how to create a sort of mobility within this type of city that is healthy and safe. So many aspects to think about, and that makes it very interesting to move forward.
It's brilliant. It's brilliant. I mean, I go back to, like, I'm very struck in terms of, you know, actually one of the solutions to many, you know, I guess many of our problems is actually spending a bit more time outside. I mean, it's, that's not possible for everybody, but for many of us, actually getting the discipline of being outside is relatively simple to do. And I think if you've then got people who are able to kind of identify safer places, and that's that fantastic marriage of technology and this research where an app or something which can tell you a safer path or something, I think is bloody brilliant, to be honest.
Yeah, exactly. That's what that one is going forward to be, an app, as you said. At least that's the hope, to create that kind of information, like data-driven, informative ways of how we can be healthier and safer. Yeah, on another note, you will talk with Nicholas later. Of course, he's focusing again on this response characterization towards broader spectral understanding of light. Of course, he will tell you more about it, and that's more of the understanding of these responses. What are the physiological, psychological responses that we have? And there we are also trying to really understand what is the exposure at the personal level. So a lot of times we have made understanding over years. I mean, we are becoming more and more data capable and sensor capable. So we have to take advantage of these. We have, as a researcher at least, to understand, okay, what am I exposed really here on my body, not in the room? Because, okay, the room is the room, but what am I being exposed to? So we are using a massive amount of wearables in his studies to understand what actually people are exposed to, how is that going to affect their sleep. And one part of it, of course, is also on near-infrared that he's really interested in, and he will talk about it with you later on. And and I think that's really fascinating to be able to lead that kind of study, that we can have a hopefully statistically enough data to be able to say something in that relation, like what are these impacts that we are talking about on the built environment.
I think it's been a really, really fascinating conversation. I mean, every time I think about this subject, I could talk all day. I mean, literally. And I feel very honoured that people like yourself, who are spending a lot of time, will actually take the time to talk about it. I think it's a fascinating subject, though. And one that I think if we can, as you say, we can get it out there, will make a difference to so many people's lives, And I think that's great, because this is about reconnecting people with the sun or the outside environments more generally, or, inside and health and well. So, I think it's been brilliant. But thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Dave. It's been a pleasure to be able to be here today and to talk about these various different topics that we talked about. But yeah, it is multi-generational, multi-dimensional, multi-effective, hopefully.
Fantastic. I'm just going to do one thing, which is, so Mandana Khanie, who is Lecturer of Health and Wellbeing and Sustainable Buildings and Deputy Director, Light and Lighting Programme. Sorry, because I just was not, when I read it out, the Light and Lighting Programme, it didn't quite, the Deputy Director, Light and Lighting Programme. Is that at UCL as well?
Yes.
Okay. When I read it out, it didn't quite make sense to me, so hence I slowed down a bit, but it may sound all right. But I'm just going to stop now.